In this video, I'm going to show you how to shingle a valley with architectural shingles, and we're going to do it California style. And if you're new to this channel, my name is Josh. Channel is all about DIY to save a ton of money. So be sure to subscribe, ring that bell so you get a notification every time I release a new video, and hammer that like button for me. That's all I ask in return for making this video. So we got a lot to go over today, so let's get started. Whenever I shingle a roof, I always wear my safety harness, and I have a rope that's attached to the peak that hooks to it. So that way it keeps me safe while working on top of the roof. And also, if you're not comfortable working on a roof, do not work on a roof. Hire a roofer to do your shingles. And I've been in construction for many years, and even though I'm comfortable doing it, I will always tie off with a safety harness whenever possible. So your safety is your responsibility, so take care of yourself. Before installing the roof underlayment and installing the ice and water shield around the edges, we must first install what's called drip edge. And this is going to be something we're going to start at the very end, line it up flush, and then nail it using 1¼ inch nails, and that's going to hold it into place. And these are just standard galvanized roofing nails. So I'm going to start here on this edge, installing it. This drip edge is going to be installed in conjunction with aluminum fascia. So when we install it, we want to make sure that we place it snugly against the sub fascia, that we can lift it up and slide the aluminum fascia under it. And you can see we nailed it about every 16 inches. At the very end, we want to hold off nailing this because the next piece will slide over it. To cut it square, we simply place a square line using a speed square. Use our 10 snips to cut down the line. We used a full piece to start up the rake, and we nailed right where they lapped over the eave. And then we want to take our 10 snips to cut where they come together at the bottom so that it gives a better profile. And then we can just break off that small piece. You can see we got a nice finished edge, and then we'll just continue installing it down the roof. And whenever we place it together, we want to lap over about 1 inch and tap it together with a hammer, then place a nail wherever they lace together. And you can see we have a nice beautiful 1 inch lap, and we continue that process around the whole house. The reason why I wanted to start off this valley installation with the drip edge is because whenever you go to install shingles, drip edge is a critical component to a roof installation. Whenever we get to the corner where the valley is going to be, you can see I notched out around the drip edge that was already installed to give us a nice finish inside corner. And we continue installing the drip edge like we typically would after we exit the corner. We're going to go around the whole house using that technique, and once we get to the outside corner, we would just repeat the technique I already showed you where we cut the profile to match. After watching this video, you'll have a very good understanding on how to install shingles in general. So after we install the drip edge, we want to make sure we place boards so that we do not hit our ladder on the drip edge as we go up and down the roof to install the shingles. So you can see we have a gap here between the drip edge and ladder. Place the pitch of the roof with a speed square on the vertical side of the drip edge, snip the vertical line. We then would fold that to go right over the peak of the roof, and that's going to give you a nice cut on your drip edge. Where some people go wrong installing drip edge is that they'll install it over the underlayment that I'm going to show you installing here shortly. You actually never want to do that if you can avoid it, because the water has to drain over the drip edge instead of under it. So if water hits the underlayment, it's going to go under the drip edge if you place it on top, which will cause rot over time. So it's very important that you install the drip edge first, and it also gives a place for the ice and water shield to adhere to. I'm now installing what's called ice and water shield, and I'm using the back roll method to where I get the peel and stick underlayment started, and then I can just pull the paper off the back or plastic, and then it'll stick as I roll it, which is very easy compared to other ways. And going up the valley, we do one side. It's typically 2 layers, so you can pull the one side off and get it positioned where you need it, like I'm doing here. And then we will grab the other side and get it started and peel it and stick it right into the valley. But it's very important that you try to get this as centered as possible, because you want equal amount going up the edge for protection. And this stuff is extremely sticky, so as you can see, I got rubber coated gloves, and it wants to stick to it extremely well, which that's what you want. And also, whenever you place your underlayment on top of this, you could go right over it, or you can overlap it about 6 inches, then stop it. You can see I'm cutting here at the edge, and I'll put a link to this exact underlayment in the description below, but you can see we got it up the eaves first and then the valley. You could also install it on the rake if you wanted. We're now installing the regular underlayment. This is synthetic roof underlayment, and I recommend this over felt because felt will definitely rip easier compared to the synthetic. So whenever we install this, we want to make sure we lap it over and nail it off properly, and I'm using a cap stapler for ease of installation. We now got the underlayment on enough to where we can have the shingles delivered, and when we have the shingles delivered, they're going to set them right on the peak. So I recommend getting the underlayment on to at least up over the peak. The reason why that's important is because while you're installing the shingles, if it does rain, it will go under the underlayment, so you want it to go over the underlayment instead of being trapped onto the sheathing. You can see we got the shingles on the roof and we are now ready to install the shingles up the valley. When starting the valley, we must install the starter strip and chalk our lines for the shingle. Now with the starter strip, this starter strip is 7 3/4 inches wide, and the shingle itself comes out to be about 13 inches. So we want to chalk a line right off the drip edge 7 inches, and that's going to give us a 3/4 inch overhang. So that's what we're going with these shingles. Typically that's a common overhang. And then with the chalked lines, we want to come up and chalk a line 13 inches for our shingle to start the first row. And I always recommend chalking the starter strip and the shingle for your first row, so that way you have them even, because if you try to go off this, there's a little variation in the starter sometimes. So we're going to chalk the lines for these two, and also we're going to chalk for every other row of shingle. And the exposed end of the shingle here, the exposure is 5 5/8. So we're going to chalk every other row up the roof before starting our valley, and you'll see why here in a moment. An easy way to mark for every other row: after we marked the first row, he held me on that measurement and I marked every 11 1/4 inch, which is double the exposure, 5 5/8. So that way we can mark that up the rake and up from the valley. And then we want to extend the chalk line past the first mark so it goes into the valley. When starting the valley, we need to decide or figure out which side of the roof is going to have the most water runoff. And the reason why that is, the way this California close cut is, we're going to have a shingle that's going to come over and overlap the ones from this side or this side. So because of that, let's say we have this one laying up the valley and then this one comes over and stops. If the water's running off in excessive amounts, it could slide up into and under this shingle, which you will see more here in just a bit. So to minimize that risk, we're going to decide which side has the least amount of runoff and start with that side laying the shingles up. And this one actually has equal amount because it's the same pitch and same distance from the eave to the peak. So there is no difference here. We can start either way, so it's really personal preference. But that's the idea of figuring out which one has the most water runoff and why. So we're going to start here laying the shingles up the valley and lining them up with the chalked lines. To begin the valley, we're going to begin with the starter strip, and we're going to start on the side in which we're going to begin running the shingles up the valley. And this starter strip needs to be lined up with our 7 inch chalk line. It's going to give us our 3/4 inch overhang. We're just going to put a nail at each end for now, because we're not sure exactly where this is going to break until we lay the shingle into the valley. So we're just going to tack a nail on each end on the chalk line. And we're using 1 1/4 inch roofing nails. And we're going to be using our coil nailer later with the air compressor, but for demonstration, it's too much noise and I feel it's going to be best just to hand nail it on for now. And we want to make sure not to nail too close to that end because of the drip edge overhang. We want to stay up about 1 inch or so above the tar line. And when we nail this side, we want to place our weight into the valley to help make sure it's all the way down. And we'll place a nail on this side. We'll now use another strip to start on the other side. Using a full shingle, we're going to lay this one on the side that we're going to place the close cut on, and we're going to lace the next one over it. And in order to install this, we need to make sure we're at least 12 inches up out of the actual valley. So for instance, right here is about 12 inches. We need to make sure that we come up at least that far and not place a nail within 6 inches of the valley. So we can nail up into here, just don't put a nail down in the valley. And this is where we're going to line it up on our chalk line. That's for our first row. And make sure you nail in the common bond of the shingle. That's very important. And we're going to place one right here at the end and then tuck it down into the valley and get on our chalk line. I'm now going to place a nail up here in the top of it. And again, we can place a nail down in here if we like, but that's good enough for now. And you'll notice, like I said, this breaks here. That's why we didn't place a nail in the starter strip yet, because we need to know where it breaks. So we can now place a nail underneath this shingle into the starter strip. And we'll get that with the nail gun later. For this shingle, we want to rinse and repeat what we did on this one. So again, we're going to run it up at least 12 inches. And that looks really good. And if you'd like, we can go ahead and place our nails in now. We know that this is going to break here. So we can go ahead and finish nailing our starter strip on this one. You want to stay away from that joint about 6 inches with your nail. All right, we'll nail up here. And now for the next ones, this is where all we have to do is come back just about 6 inches, make sure we're 12 inches up in the valley, line it up with our exposed side. We need to make sure our exposure is right, and this is 5 5/8, which happens to be in line obviously right here. So I'm just going to line it up, tack a nail, place our weight on it, tack our nail there, and stay 6 inches up out of here. We need to place another nail. And place our other nail here. All right, and if you remember the chalk lines we made coming through here, this is one of the best reasons we can line up that chalk line, stay 6 inches back, like so, and make sure again we're up at least 12 inches up out of the valley, which we are. Nail here, place our weight here. Okay. And you can see as we go, we're stepping back 6 inches. Make sure we're 12 inches up on this side. We're going to rinse and repeat that until we get up to the top of the peak. I'm switching over to the coil nailer, and I'm going to show doing up this whole valley. And also I'm going to show you how I'm going to lift up this shingle to place that nail in under here. So that's all ready to go. So I'm just going to time lapse going up this valley. Not only is this process a quick way of doing a valley, it's also excellent because you do not have to cut starters and start off the rake. This is going to be where we start running our full rows of shingles, and that is why it's so critical to get those offset properly, because that's going to be the offset of all the shingles in the rows. And you can see once you get going, not only because its time lapse is fast, but it's a very quick method to go right up this valley. In real time, I want to say it only took me about 30 minutes to run this whole section of the valley, but this is only half of the work. The other half is going to be getting ready to be started here soon. Okay, you can see we got the shingles up the valley, and we do not have any nails right in this center. That's all non-nailed. And if you look at the chalk lines we made, that's why you want to make them, is so that you can line them up and run them square in the valley as you go. Because if you don't, it could get cocked on you and be all crooked. So that's very, very important. So now we need to chalk a line 2 inches up out of this valley, and it's going to go right up the side that's going to have the closed cut. So we're going to mark 2 inches here, then 2 inches at the peak, then snap a line. There's our chalked line. Again, you want to make sure you're 2 inches up from this center, simply because water lays in here and it could wick up into the closed cut, but odds are still slim, but still having 2 inches up is very important. We're right up that whole valley with the chalk line. I'm using Liquid Nails Roof Repair, and this is a sealant, so it's going to help seal the shingle we're going to lay here down to where this overlap is. So it's very important to do this step just for the extra security, so water doesn't go up under that closed cut. We're going to start here and just run it about 2 inches up from that chalk line onto this overlap. Want a nice liberal bead. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, that's for sure. Yep. We got a nice bead going right up the side where the California Valley's going, and that's looking really good. Now all we have to do is take a full shingle to start out with. We're going to lay it right on that chalked line, and we're going to line it up right to the edge of this first shingle we started off the bottom. And this first shingle is the only one that laced. The rest of them just get covered up like this. So right on that chalked line, that looks pretty good. Just going to nail here. And we don't want to nail down here because our next shingle is going to come. This side is going to be exposed a little bit, but we're going to cover that up. So you want to keep your nail right up into here. All right, we just repeat that going clear up this valley. And you gotta remember, when you nail this on, you're gonna have a lot of nails over this, so you really just need enough to hold it down until you get shingles over it. Before doing a California close cut valley, or California valley, which is what some people would call it, definitely check with the manufacturer of the shingles you're going to be installing to make sure that's an acceptable method. Once we reach the top, we're going to slide this shingle under the top row, and you may have to trim off some because of the nail pattern, and then we're going to secure it like we typically would. What I like to do is step right here after we place this down to get it to seal against that sealant. And yes, I need new shoes. Now to do this side, we're going to place our starter strip on first, line it up with our chalk line. We're going to place our full shingle, and we're lining up with this chalk line. And remember to nail in the common bond. And you want to make sure that you keep your nail back here because your brake's going to be here. We like to place 5 nails in our shingles. Now here's the beauty of this closed cut. When we place this shingle on, all we have to do is line it up with the edge here and line it up with the shingle for our correct exposure. Now once we get up here, we can use our chalk lines. So again, flush with the edge of that shingle. You'll notice a little bit of this nailing lines exposed, and it's a little off color from the rustic black of the shingle. Now we're going to cover that up with roof patch so you'll never see that. So what you could do if you're really concerned about that, instead of placing this next shingle down to continue this first row, you simply can start at this bottom as your first row to where it overlaps like that, and then start your shingles right up off that. If you're concerned about that, we're fine with it, it's no big deal. So we're going to come back up here, place it up in line with the edge of that shingle and our correct exposure, and we're going to nail this into place. And when this shingle comes through, it's going to break here. Again, it's about 6 inches back whenever we follow this up, so we want to nail back here. So more or less just your typical nail pattern. And this is how easy it is to keep running this up. We want to line this edge right up with the edge of that shingle up the valley and get our correct exposure. And we have our chalk lines to go with now. Again, that's why it's nice to have chalk lines for these valley roofs. Now, if this wasn't a valley roof, I wouldn't chalk these lines this close. I'd put them about every 4th row or so. But in this case, it's great when you have a valley to have chalked lines like that. So that looks good there. And now when you're doing this, you want to make sure that you get the correct spacing here when this steps up so that your joints aren't too close. So check the manufacturer's recommendations on your shingles, how close that can be. If you have to, you may have to trim off an inch or two to get your correct edge that steps over, let's say 6 or 7 inches. So that's fine here. So different pitch roofs come together are going to create different steps. So you need to check again as you go if you might need to cut these down. So this first row, when we place it on, we got to make sure we keep our nail away from that break. So more or less, we just continue that up this whole valley to start our rows for this side of the roof. Like I mentioned on the other side of this valley, this is going to be the starters that are going to be for this side of the roof. Now you don't have to cut on the rake side, just like I mentioned about the other side as well. So it's very quick to be able to do it this way. You get your valley knocked out of the way and you also get your starters out of it. So it's 2 birds with 1 stone approach. If you are interested in learning how to do a roof that does not have a valley and you must cut the starters, I'll put a link in the description below to a very detailed video installing these exact shingles on a standard roof. As you can see, that is a quick way to go right up the valley and get it started. All the complicated work is done, so now all we have to do is run our shingles like we normally would. Other than this row, we just need to make sure when we nail it, we stay back and the nail pattern breaks out properly. But other than that, all the hard work's done, and just keep working it like we normally would. Again, in my other shingle video where I'm running the straight rows, I go in very great detail everything you need to know about that. And I also install what's called ridge vent, to where this roof is just going to be capped off up top, and that roof has ridge vent, so you will learn different things in that video as well. To finish up the rake side, we just have to run the starter strip using a 7-inch chalk line just like we did on the eave side of the roof. roof. And in order to finish up the rows, very simple, we just cut them the length to finish up the rows. If we have a shingle that's going to break out any shorter than 5 inches, we will recut a shingle in order to space it properly to give us a bigger shingle at the end to minimize the risk of wind picking up the edge. If you're curious to why we choose to do dimensional shingles, which are also known as architectural shingles like you see here in this video, it's because they are way easier and typically they are better than 3-tab shingles. Now I did make a detailed video installing 3-tab shingles if you're interested in that, but typically 3 tabs are good for things like barns or sheds or something of that nature if you get them cheap. But typically I would highly recommend just going with architectural shingles if you have an option, but some shed packages and whatnot only send 3 tabs. On the other side of the roof, the valley intersects into the rake at the bottom, so you do not have an eave to pull off of. So what I do there is use a framing square and square off the drip edge on the rake side. That's going to give us the best place possible to start the first 3 rows off the bottom. And then once you get up off the first 3 rows, I'll measure down from the peak to get the same measurement to make sure our shingle is running square with the peak of the roof, which is very important. And you can see here as I'm installing these shingles right here on the edge, I have them cut the length, so it is a lot of cutting starting out, but after that it runs just like the other side. In order to cap off the roof, we're going to use the caps that come to where it's already easily able to be broken apart into sections. Now you can cut shingles to make the caps, but this makes it way easier. To break these apart, very easy. All we have to do is fold right here and right here, and it's just simply going to break apart more or less, and that's going to give us 3 caps per piece here. So that's the easiest way to do it. And now we need to make a starter strip out of the caps. To make the starter strip, this is very simple. This is going to be the exposed side of the caps, so we want to cut this off for the starter because we just want the adhesive here that's going to hold the cap down. And all we have to do here is just mark right in front of it, flip it around. We know that's the measurement here. You can see this piece of plastic, it's about right here. This doesn't have to be perfect. And then we're just going to cut right down that. And now we got our starter strip for our caps, and we want to make sure that we put this down with the prevailing wind that's going to be blowing away from the actual caps. We don't want to install this to where the wind's going towards them. Because the prevailing wind is going in this direction, we're going to start on this side of the roof. To install the starter, very simple. We're going to center it up with the top of the roof here. That looks pretty good. So now that we have it centered where we want it and we're right here on the edge of the roof, we just got to place a couple nails right behind the tar strip. And always do 2 nails. Now for our actual cap, this is very easy. This is our exposed side. We just line this first one up flush with the edge here. And now 2 nails back here. And then we just rinse and repeat that more or less. We just want to keep our exposure is about 5.5 inches here. So that looks pretty good. Center it up and then 2 nails. And all we have to do is rinse and repeat that. And we are not putting ridge vent on because we're going to do gable vents. So we're just going to cap the top the whole way across. We're now here where the valleys come up to the peak. Now because this intersects into it right here, we got to place our caps before we overlap this way. And this is something that's going to get the prevailing wind coming in this direction, so it actually works out good anyways. So we're going to line this up here in the center. And we're going to install this just like we installed the other ones. We're now going to continue running these caps straight over it. Before placing that on, I'm going to go ahead and put this one on too. Now that we're at the end, we got to cut this last one in order to cover this up. Then we actually got to cut just a little piece to finish. As you can see, we need about that much, and we're going to cut a strip here to cap it off at the end. So we got to cut this the length first. So we're going to do that and then cut a little strip just to finish up on top of it. All right, put this on to finish this. Now this last little piece, we're going to hand drive the nails so we don't sink them too deep. We'll then just seal those off. I always like to try to add a little peak to the sealant. Here is where the covered deck intersects into the main roof. You can see we got the valleys done and the shingles up to the point where we can install the caps going across. Now here the prevailing wind is coming from this direction, but we had to install the caps in this fashion because of the way the water runs off the roof. You'll see right here, if they're facing the other way, the water would run right into the caps, and you do not want to do that. So what we're going to do here is finish up the caps going into the valleys, and it's not that complicated at all to do this. All we essentially have to do is lift up the valley shingle, and then we're going to slide them right under there. Now when you're doing this, you may have to trim off some of the sides, because as you go up into that shingle, you're going to notice that nails may be in the way in order to slide it all the way up in, kind of like we did earlier when our valley reached the very top. So whenever we install this, it's the same idea. We're going to nail 2 nails in each side of the cap, and we're going to slide them up under. Here we did have to trim off some from this cap like I mentioned in order to finish this up, and you can see everything laces together really well, and water will not go up under these caps, so that's exactly what we're looking for. A way we could have went both ways with the caps is if we were installing ridge vent, we could have installed the caps going one way then the other, and then placed the ridge vent in to connect the difference. In order to cover up the nail line that I explained to you was going to be exposed, we simply just use the roof patch to get started. Then I'll show you using the gravels that came off the shingles how to blend it. We're going to collect the little gravels that you see that fell down into the valley. We're going to use that to cover up that area, and you can use this for any area. You could also use this technique for anywhere on the roof that has a blemish. All right, we got some nice gravels. We now take our gravels and we're going to pour on it, and we're going to smooth it out. We're going to take these and pour right on it. There you go, and you can see now that looks just like a shingle, so you don't have to worry about it. Here's the final look of the California closed cut valley. You can see everything blends together very well. It's easy to do, and also this is going to protect this house for 30 plus years because these are lifetime shingles. And if you look across the top of the ridge, you can see everything turned out very uniform and nice. And after it gets warm, the shingles will seal down better. So if you do see a little lift in some of the shingles, it's because it was rather cold while we were installing them. So the first hot day, it's going to seal down and flatten out really well. And this is a video that's a continuation of my How to Build a House video series. We built this house from the ground up, and I did a video series step by step, starting with the excavation of the property, and actually built a course where I staked out the house and drew up the plans and all the necessary things to get started. If you'd like to check that out, I'll put a link to it in the description below. If you'd like to see how to install step flashing like we did where this roof met that roof, check out this video. It'll help you out.